particularly on details that relate to us ourselves, to encourage us to prepare for Christ's return, which we believe to be very, very soon in the very near future. So first of all, let's look at what we just read. There we are, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 to 3. But look at the early part of it. But at the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you. Now let's look at that closely. Take the word there, times. The Hebrew word, or Greek word, for the word times is the word chronos, from which we get chronology, right? It's talking about durations of time periods. So we're going to be looking at time periods tonight, as well as seasons. The word season speaks of the characteristic of a period. Like winter is cold. Spring is warm, blossoms are coming out. There's the characteristics of the times. So tonight we're going to be looking at two things. The signs of the times, the second part, and then the time periods. All right, so we're going to look at two aspects. We'll mix them up a little bit at times. But first of all, let's take the signs of the times. Now, remember what we just read in verse 3. Verse 2 and 3, the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety cometh, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child. And mothers know that when finally the birth comes, the birth pangs come faster and faster and faster, don't they? Until the birth comes to us. And so what we're being told is that as Christ's return comes near, the events are going to go faster and faster and faster until the Lord is here. And secondly to that, in the Old Testament it says much the same. And it says at the end, Yahweh will hasten it in his time. And so what we're to expect is things speeding up. Now, just go back a little. There we are. Last year. How long ago was it? Probably about 7, maybe 8 months ago, Russia moved into the Middle East. Did we expect to see that before Christ's return? We know it had to come, but I personally felt that we might even be called to judgment before that happened. And yet we've seen it. And of course, as we saw the other night, Russia swept in with her aircraft into here. Huge numbers. With her ships, with weaponry into here. And then over a period of 5 to 6 months, she bombarded Syria, virtually on the borders of Israel. Virtually on Israel's borders. She absolutely devastated the area. There's Aleppo, up here. She absolutely devastated. Oh yes, many of the other nations were with her. Afghanistan, Iran, and they were supporting her, along with Iraq, fighting on the ground, but she came in and bombed these areas, absolutely devastating them. So much so that people fled. 70,000 fled from around the Aleppo area to Turkey, begging to cross the border, begging to get out of this area. Here they are, on the border. And it didn't stop there. 70,000, it grew to 600,000. The numbers were huge. It was terrifying, to say the least. And we saw this last time, didn't we? Here we can see many of the Arabs also fled to the south. We don't hear much about that. We hear about them going into Europe, but they were also fleeing to the south, into Jordan. Not many want to go there and live in those sort of tent camps. But you can see the scenario building up. And that was last year, dominantly. And then you come to this year. The situation building up so bad in the area of Jordan, with the refugees coming in. What did the king of Jordan do? King Hussein? He got in a plane and flew to Moscow. He begged Moscow to help them. Jordan's refugee crisis. King Abdullah and his chief of staff hurried over to Moscow in an effort to stave off the number of refugees being driven down here. Why? Because Russia's coming in and bombing them, right up to the border of Israel. Right up to the border of Israel. And after that, she said she left. She said, March, only a month or two ago, Putin says we've left Syria. Pack of lies. Absolute pack of lies. He brought back about 3 or 4 plane loads so they could make a movie of them coming off the plane. They had left. And he's continued to build up equipment into that area. And as well as that, she's now building out in this area here a new base in Iraq. New airport base. So she can bomb this area further if she wants from the other side. Things are building up all the time. And here we are. One of Israel's arch enemies to the north in southern Lebanon, the Hezbollah. Okay? One of the arch enemies of Israel is being supported by Russia. Russians let the Hezbollah into Daria, over here. Okay? Breaking their promise with Israel. They said to Netanyahu, we won't let them come near you. You'll be safe. Deceiving Israel somewhat. And they seem to be still deceived to some degree. So, Debka says it's a critically dangerous event for Israel by Russian forces. And so those Russian forces are in this area here. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 17 that finally Damascus will be devastated. And I believe, as Brother Thomas states, by Russia. And then they will move down then also Russian troops into the area of Jordan, and later, ultimately into the area of Israel, as we know, through to Egypt, back to Jerusalem, and the Battle of Armageddon is fought. But at this stage, that's probably still a long way off, because yet she's got to get Europe on her side. She's got to get Europe fighting with her in the Middle East. Some have been doing some already. We saw that in the lecture. But nothing to the numbers we expect from Ezekiel 38, Daniel 11. But look, Russia teams up with the US to try to force Israel to abandon the Golan Heights. Said to Israel, see these Golan Heights here? I know you've got soldiers here defending this area here, but this area is still the Golan Heights. You should abandon it. You took it in 1967. Why should you hold on to it? Give it up, says Russia. And America supported it. But Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, said this. For 49 years, exactly right, for 49 years, that area has been controlled by Israel and it's been in a state of peace. Why should we abandon that area? Why should we back out of it? Israel will never withdraw from the Golan Heights. And so, there is the scenario we see taking place in the Middle East at the moment. Russia's there. She's got the right allies, the ones that we would expect in the Middle East. From Pakistan, the borders of India, right through to Iraq, allied with her in her operations in Syria. And meanwhile, huge numbers are abandoning that area. Huge numbers are desperately going across the borders into Turkey and trying to go into Europe. Now, a deal has just been struck with Turkey to cause Turkey to keep some of them back in that area. And Turkey has said, we will. We'll restrain the numbers. We'll accept some back from Europe, provided our population of 70 million have the right to go into Europe at any time, borderless. We can go in there without passports, like any of the EU members, and they agreed. What's that going to do? Only create more chaos, more difficulty for Europe. And so, what's the effect of these migrants in Europe? I think two effects. One, terrorism. Two, we'll look at it a little later. Let's take the first point, terrorism. And remember, much of this is happening at a huge pace. It's coming faster and faster and faster. So here we are last year, September, 4,000 a day coming. And now, they're sweeping into this area. And people are terrified of what's happening. Israel warned that that would be the case. Before the terrorists even came, in the huge numbers they've been coming at, going back, look at the date, quite some time ago, Israel said thousands of Al-Qaeda terrorists, nowadays we might call them ISIS, are on the loose in USA and Europe under the radar of Western intelligence. They don't know they're there. At that point, they reckon there was 11,000 Islamic terrorists in Europe and somewhat in America that got in. And they were talking, look at the date, some time ago. They're a constant commute. They're moving from the Middle East to North Africa to Europe, priming for a lethal attack. The time will come, they say. And now that's being reinforced. Even the BBC's agreeing to that. As these numbers pour in, look, that's this year. Supreme Commander of NATO says they were weaponising migrants. Russia was supporting the arming of these migrants to destabilise and undermine the whole continent of Europe. He also suggests criminals, extremists and fighters were hiding in the flow of the migrants. So not only terrorists, but just ordinary bad people moving into the area of Europe. We saw this before, didn't we? So Europe is now terrorised. Europe is fearful, but it's even growing by the minute. You see, okay, last year, November the 13th, the attack took place across Paris. 6 attacks, only 5 sown there. 130 killed, 300 wounded in one attack. One event, I might say, even though it was 6 attacks. Similarly, the attack took place in Brussels, as we saw before. And they're expecting that to be the new normal. This will not be the last. Things are looking terrifying, in a terrible state. Death toll at that time was over 30, and it grew. And the near certainty there's more to come. But you see, that time, the attack resulted in one man escaping. That man, a terrorist, killed this chap. He was killed. Before they rounded him up, they got him, the terrorists, on the picture, on the movie, in Brussels airport, escaping after the explosion went off. They wondered what he'd do. They tried chasing around Europe. Before they could get him, he killed this man. What was his job? He was a security guard for this place. And this terrorist had stolen the pass that would allow him into here. Fortunately, the police captured him before he went any further. What was he after? When the Charlie Hebdo attack took place, now probably 18 months, 18 months ago, the first attack took place in France. On that occasion, they went into the homes of all the terrorists who died, and they found in almost all of them maps of nuclear facilities around France. Descriptions of what to do to get into them. What were they after? This is what they were after. Nuclear material. Brussels attack. Nuclear terrorism, a real threat, says the UN watchdog. Now, what were they trying to do? They weren't going to make an atom bomb. They were going to get what they call a dirty bomb. Now, any of you could make one of them. I could make one of them. It's not very hard. Just get a gas bottle off a, house. Cut off the top when the gas is out of it. So you've got a nice steel outside, and load it with nuclear material they don't want, like uranium-238, which is not fissionable, but it's deadly. Then go and put a couple of sticks of gelignite in it and a fuse to it. All of you could do that. And then take it up and somewhere high outside Hamilton, well, maybe don't do this, but this is what they could do, all right? And let it off. The gas, the particles of that uranium-238 will be scattered all across Hamilton, and nobody could live in Hamilton for 20 years. Cameron said, the Prime Minister of Britain, they're planning to use drones loaded with chemical with this nuclear material and dump it across parts of Europe. You imagine what that would be like? You go and live in that area, you'd get bombarded by the nuclear material, you could die from radiation poisoning. Terrible. Terrible. And so this is what they're fearful of, a dirty bomb. The nuclear terrorism has become an alarming possibility. They plan to set off dirty bombs. That seems to be what they're doing. And only a few days ago, May, how long ago is that? The second time in Georgia, they arrested five trying to sell uranium used in bombs. Russians were doing that to these terrorists. Arming them, it would seem. And here's a little container with uranium-238 in it. You can't use that in an atom bomb, but it's very dangerous. Very dangerous. So things are looking frightening, to say the least. So much so, half the French army is now deployed on the French streets. So half the French army, one of the largest armies in Europe, I think it's the second largest, is now occupied the role of being a policeman. They've got one here, one on that corner, one on that corner, so they're watching people in case something, terrorist activity goes on. Somebody tries to let off a dirty bomb, say, or an ordinary bomb. They're fearful. So the country is looking inwards. Can the army defend the country? No. Not easily. Well, at least half of them are occupied in that way. And if further terrorist attacks take place, probably all of them will be. On corners. How can they defend the country? They need a whole series of soldiers with their tanks, equipment, to stop the Russians moving if they need to. We know the Bible suggests Russia controls Europe. Russia will take control of Europe. The single biggest French military operation anywhere in the world right now is to be policemen on the street corners of Paris and other cities. So now, come back to what we saw. Terrorism. But let's go a bit further. An opportunity for Russia to move into Europe. Now, I can't guarantee how she's going to do it. We know she will. Look at this. Ezekiel 38. What does it say? We know it well. We've heard lecture after lecture on Ezekiel 38. Go to the land of Magog, Germany. Prince of Rosh, Meshach and Tubal, Russia. And Gomer, France, will come together. There is the key nations of Europe. And we know from Daniel 2, all of Europe will be involved, won't it? The 10 toes. And so, how is it moving at the moment? Well, let's go back a little while. We know this chap. Vladimir Putin plotting to invade Europe. The international business paper over in Australia, a respectable reporter. It claims this, that Putin wants to get the whole of Europe to Portugal. Putin's dream of having a sphere of influence across the continent all the way to Portugal. That's what they think he plans. He has concrete plans, they say, of invading Europe. Staggering. But that's exactly what we've expected for years, isn't it? But it's now looking like it's imminent. It's now looking like it's soon. That means time is short. Now come closer to our time. Last year. This was a suggestion made by Russia. Eastern Europe, in Eastern Europe, Russia said, we had to retreat from there in 1989 to 1991 when the oil price collapsed. Remember we talked about it in the lecture? Russia became absolutely poverty-stricken. Oil price hit $12 a barrel at one point. People were queuing up for a little bit of food. They couldn't afford to keep their army in Eastern Europe, so they pulled out. But you see, in Eastern Europe, many of the people who managed things were Russians by then. Russians, brought down from Russia. They might run supermarkets. They might run businesses. They might run the government. They didn't go back to Russia. They would have been crazy to go back to Russia. Think of the food price. Think of the amount of food. They stayed home. They stayed back there in Eastern Europe. So Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Bulgaria, we could go on. Those countries have got large numbers of Russian-speaking people in them. Putin's contacted them. Said this: if you've got anybody in your family who are 18 to 30-year-old, and they speak Russian, obviously left behind after Russia retreated, they're eligible to list in the Russian army and be paid now. They can be part of our army. They don't wear the uniform. They just merge. They're in the whole of this Eastern Europe area. And when we call on them, they're to fight. What does that mean? Well, it means this: that in those countries there's insurrectionists who are pro-Russian. Go to Estonia. 76% of the population are Russian-speaking. Come down one country, Latvia. It's around about 60-something, I think about 64%. Come down to Estonia, 50-something%. Over half of the people could turn in a moment and become supporting of Putin. And that goes through much of Eastern Europe. It doesn't stop there. Here we can see we're dealing with the country of Lithuania, this one over here. The most southern of that Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, I referred to a moment ago, with high Russian populations. In this country, well, they are very sensible. They know how to sort out Russia. How do you do that? You write a book. Give it to everybody. Books are the answer, aren't they? They're the answer to everything. Is that right? They wrote a 98-page book and gave it to everybody in Lithuania. And what was it all about? What to do when Russia takes over. Gave it to everybody. What they started off by saying is this: go out in your garden, get the lawn, roll back the lawn, and dig a room under this lawn so that nobody knows where it is. Hide it. And in that room, stack away the food because you're going to need it. Get away a year's supply of food. You need medicines like me, getting a bit older? Okay, you better get enough medicine for 2 years. Stash it away, because when the Russian comes, you won't get it. And then hide, bring the lawn back so it can't be seen. Or if you've got a cave and you think you can get out, here's a route that might work. Oh, you've got a yacht, you can sail. Here's some bearings that might get you into Germany or other parts of Europe. So all sorts of ideas were in that book to help the people to do something when Russia takes over. And finally, if you hear gunshots outside your window, then it's not the end. Duck, keep low, do this. Telling them what to do when the fighting really starts in the streets of Lithuania. And when that book came out, other countries said, we're preparing to do the same, if need be. We'll produce the same book, print it in our language. So Europe is sort of beginning to fold before the terror, the fear of Russia. Russia is now intimidating them further. You want to continue to oppose me? Look, Russia simulates a nuclear strike in the area against Sweden. Sweden's not even part of the EU. Terrorising Sweden here. And most concerned are Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, former Soviet states that we talked about before a few moments ago. They're terrified. And now they are saying it would take the Russian forces just 60 hours to overrun those Baltic states. 60 hours and it's all over. And it's quite scary what's going on. Take this one. This is going back a little bit. Last year. This appeared over London. When it first appeared, it was in cloud. Doesn't matter. It came in towards Heathrow Airport with its transponders turned off. So other planes coming in didn't know it was there in the cloud. It flew around the airport, right? This was not the first attempt. There's many of them that's happened to Britain. All right? This heavy bomber came in, and then Heathrow Airport didn't know what to do with it. They radioed up, saying, look, get out of the way. They couldn't stop it. So what they did was they got all the planes coming in from, Canada, Australia, you name it, and redirect them to Birmingham Airport or to Paris Airport, not to Heathrow, because they didn't want it to collide with this thing. Finally, they got fighters up and drove it out. When they drove it out, it flew out across London, away it went. And Cameron got on the telephone and said to Putin, how dare you do that? To send a bomber in with an atom bomb on board. In other words, if they'd shot that down over London, what would a London look like now? Hiroshima. Nagasaki. So you can see they're not, they're terrible what they're doing. It's terrifying. And so, go back to those countries. They're arming frantically now, trying to rally like mad. The world has started to spending more on weapons, particularly these Baltic states. They're frantically arming. Lithuania, 32% jump in their weaponry. What are they going to do? Well, let's take Poland, for instance. Poland's called up 46,000 men out of their industry into their army. They've been trained as part-time soldiers. Some of them have been even overseas in Britain, got work there. They had to come home to defend Poland. 46,000 of them were called up, above what they already had, to deploy a massive 46,000 strong army. The Kremlin is seeking to expand Russia's influence across Eastern Europe. Isn't that what we expected from the Bible? Of course it is. It's exactly what we've expected for 100-odd years, from Dr. Thomas times onward. And here we can see it's coming. It's absolutely scary what's going on. But for us, thrilling. It means the time is short. Look at this. Estonia president seeks a permanent NATO force. He said, look, I need soldiers permanently in my country. He said this, Russia could take over Estonia before the NATO Rapid Response Force could be deployed there. He said, look, can't you see, I've got on my border only 40 to 80,000 soldiers, Russian soldiers, facing me. America, please help. Obama did respond. The first response he gave was really quite significant. He sent up 150 soldiers. Do the sums. 150 against somewhere between 40 to 80,000, maybe 60,000 on average. How are they going to cope? And he said this, we can land troops in your area in 48 hours. We can land them in 48 hours. It's somewhere up there. But anyhow, Estonia said they can land, they can take our capital city in 4 hours. 4 hours, it's all over. That 48 hours is hopeless. It's just too late. Now, finally, America is responding, but not enough. And only half-hearted. They don't want to be involved in this. This is looking frightening. Let's go one more. It's Finland. Further to the north of Estonia. They have contacted their reservists, nearly 1 million of them, and said, be prepared at a moment's notice to go into action, to join together, come together, get equipped and fight for Estonia. So letters have been dispatched to them all to prepare, to be ready, to leave at a moment's notice to defend their country. And so things are really moving. Here's something that's only happened in the last few days. Look at the date. Over to the back end of Turkey, here's Turkey, over here, Georgia has had some troops put into it by America. America has now sent them into there, some 650 US troops, 100 British troops, and the consequences of it is Russia slams upcoming US Georgia military drills. Says, what the heck are you doing? Justification for us to go to action. You are provoking a war, America. You are provoking a war, Britain. Of course they're not. They're trying to defend. But Russia's using that as justification to say things are looking pretty frightening. We're ready to go to war against these countries who are getting American troops in and British troops in and so on. Of course, it's totally the other way round, isn't it? Same happened this week in Romania. America has promised some troops to go into Romania and missiles to go into Romania. They say it's to defend against Iranian weapons. Russia says it's aimed at us. Therefore, we are justified to put more troops on the borders of Romania. So the scenario, as we saw the other night, is this. Here it is, isn't it? Russia. A little token. Oh, NATO's doing something now. And everybody's hoping like heck that'll work. Well, we know it's not going to. Just to take the troops that have been called up and put on the scene. NATO's got about 4,000. And the minimum number Russia's got there, or called up over the last year, is around about 350,000. Above what is her the already size of her army. Above that. So you can see where they're going. And so, look at this. Only a few weeks ago, World War III hangs by a thread. Russia threatens Europe. US sends troops. The tensions are rising in the European area, and it could lead to World War III in a moment. That's what they're saying. How long's it going to be? We don't know. How's it going to be achieved? We don't exactly know. But it looks like much of Europe is going to dissolve away because of the problems of the immigrants, the migrants. Their capacity to defend themselves is becoming weaker and weaker internally. At the same time, they're moving, trying to get a few troops to the borders, but it's going to be nothing. And it looks like Russia, whenever it wants to make its move, will make its move. One way or another. Either by invasion or maybe by stimulating the terrorism so the countries fall apart internally. But now move on. Another key thing we know. Britain's got to leave Europe. Son of man, set thy face against Gog of the land of Magog, Gomer. So there we are talking about Germany and France. And in verse 13, a different block, a different power group, the merchants of Tarshish shall say unto thee, hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey? So the two antagonistic groups. This group, Britain, and the Commonwealth countries, Canada, Australia, you name it, almost certainly America. They will be opposed to this other group, won't they? So what are we to see? Britain will separate from Europe, and the EU must break up. Britain's got to go its own way. And now, the start of this year, February, Cameron went over to Europe, tried to get a good deal from the Europeans, because Cameron wants Britain to stay in the EU. He said, now give us a good deal. So I can go back to my people and say, look, I've got what we wanted. He didn't get what he wanted. He came home saying, oh, I got something, but nothing like what he was hoping. They didn't offer him what he wanted. And so, British voters appear to be getting ready to march to the exit door for the European Union after a new poll revealed a 12% lead for Brexit, that is, leaving the EU. Britain's leaving. And so things are looking very precarious there. It's got stronger and stronger, the move to leave, since that article was written. What's going on in Europe? Europe will fall amid terror and migrant strain. Well, that's what we've been talking about, haven't it? Here we are, the Express and London paper. And it's starting in Germany amidst the EU head. What's going on? Well, the EU will crumble. It's falling apart. Economically, it's in a real strife. Look at this. Another reason to leave, the EU economy is decaying. Why, Britain, tie yourself up with an economy that's in a hopeless state while Britain's booming? And Britain, if it stays in the EU, has got to help fund EU. Billions have to go over to the EU as part of the deal. So June the 23rd, 24th, Britain's going to vote. And scripturally, we would expect her to lead. Maybe not then. We don't know dogmatically, but it looks that way. Europe's economy is crumbling. It's falling apart. And so, as we saw the other night, Europe many years ago was invaded by the Huns, the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Burgundians, the 10 barbarian tribes, and now we're seeing the same again. This time it's Arabs. And if we take Genesis 16, his hand shall be against any man's hand, and it certainly seems that way. And so, here's Europe, as Stratfor said, March the 1st, 2016, the shape of things to come, Europe's looking destabilised. And he put some numbers on them. The area which was the old Iron Empire, you go through that area there, and there is 10 nations. 10 groups. You might count it slightly differently. It could be 11, it could be 12, doesn't matter. It could be 9. But it's about the right number. And that's what this key paper, Stratfor, stated. And so we can see things are an exciting situation. Europe is likely to break up, be allied itself with Russia, move with Russia into the Middle East, and Russia's already there, ready to go. All it needs is now Europe to fall into place. And that could all happen after Christ returns and raises the dead and judges those who are faithful. All right. But of the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. I want to talk about times for a minute. We'd like to know this, wouldn't we? If we knew that, we'd have our bags packed, ready for signing on, wouldn't we? I don't suppose we're going to have to pack our bags, but you know what I'm saying. I'm proverbially saying that. Well, I want to go back a few years. I want to go back to the Second World War. In the time of the Second World War, this brother, Ezek Collier, was written to by the brethren. During the early part of the Second World War, Russia joined with Germany to destroy Poland. They carved it up in half. Each took half. So the earlier part of the war, Rosh, Meshach and Tubal were allied to Magog. The brethren said, hey, this looks like Armageddon. Second World War is probably going to lead to Christ's return. And they were getting very excited about the prospect. So they wrote to him and said, is this right? And he said, I'm sorry, no. No, he said. I tell you what he said, if you want to know when the things are going to start to begin to lead up to Armageddon, he said, write down the date, 2015. Let's see what he said. I've shortened, of course, and it's been reprinted twice since then. As you can see, Testimony 2004, and I think it was last year it was reprinted again. Okay? And this is what he said. At first thought, which arises with time periods, it's a bit unwise to, put much weight on it, to speak too confidently. It's still worse an error, though, to be indifferent. After all, he's saying, there's a lot of dates in the Scripture. Not consequential. God didn't give them to us for no reason at all. We should know what they mean, don't we? So he says, it's still a worse an error to be indifferent. Always be interested in the question, how long? All right? Now he says, Pepin, king of France, came into Italy and conquered the temporal power and conferred the temporal power upon the Pope. in the year AD 755, and actually it was 755 through to 756. And according to this, the end will be 1,260 years later. Do the sums. It's last year, is the beginning. That's what he said. Now, turn with me to Daniel chapter 7. Let's see where he got this idea from. Daniel chapter 7. Now, I've got some of this on the PowerPoint for you to see, but when you get there, I would like you to look at verse 8. So, Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. Now, let's first of all think about Daniel 7 for a minute. Daniel 7 says much the same as Daniel 2. Daniel 2, it talks about all these empires and describes them as lovely, pretty, gorgeous metals, glowing. He's talking to Nebuchadnezzar. That's how he saw it. But now he's talking to brethren and sisters, and he talks about the gold as being a cruel lion. The silver, the bear, rapacious animals. He's talking about the nations to us, to brethren and sisters. So he describes them as cruel animals. Now, so this chapter is addressed to us. The previous chapter is addressed to Nebuchadnezzar primarily. All right? Now look what he says. Let's read verse 8. And it's probably worth colouring in the green bits if you liked. Now, O king, I've got chapter 6. Let's try again. Chapter 8 and verse 8. Therefore, have I got it right? Come on, I'll get there wrong in a minute. Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to go a little too quickly because time might run away from me in a minute. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So here we are. There were, the Roman power had 10 horns, but 3 of them were plucked up and given to another horn that had a big mouth and no ears. Who's that one? Anybody like to guess? Well, I can see a smile here and there, and I know those people know. It's the Pope, okay? It was given to the papacy, okay? But we're not dealing with that particularly yet. I'll come with that in a moment. Then, within 2 verses always comes the word, and judgment will take place. Let's look again. It's the only thing that's repeated 3 times in this chapter is these 2 things. And here it is again. Look what he says. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the others which came up, before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And then 2 verses later on, judgment. Look again. Verse 24. And he shall subdue 3 kings. And 2 verses later on, judgment. So let's tie them together. There they are. And they're linked. They're saying the same thing. Now, it's said 3 times in that chapter. Now, no other 2 subjects are dealt with in that chapter 3 times. That's why Brother Sully was very interested in this chapter and what was going on. Now, let's have a look at the history behind it. Well, 3 of the first horns were plucked up. Stated 3 times. There's the verses. Okay? Now, of the barbarians, the 10 came in and they took up states. These 3 were defeated by this man, Pepin of France. Now, Pepin of France was religious. His son later on became Charlemagne, who established the Holy Roman Empire. So you can see quite a religious bent there, can't you? And he thought, well, I'd like to get things nice for me when I die. So he went over to the Pope and said, what would you like? Oh, he said, I'd like some territory. I'd like some countries to rule over. So he said, all right, I will defeat these, and I want you to give me a guaranteed ticket to heaven. See? Pretty smart, wasn't he? So what he did, he came in here, marched in. He did it on 2 occasions. The first time in 754, and he defeated them temporarily, gave them to the Pope, and they lost them. So they had to come back the next year and fight that year and the next year, 755 to 756, we'll look at that in a minute, and finally gave it to the Pope. So here's what we read before. And the 10 horns are the 10 kings. They are the 10 on the dragon. And another shall arise, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High until times that are dividing at times. What's that period? It's 1,260 years, isn't it? Days for years. All right, so let's have a look at it. Here it was. The papacy took control of the region. 755, you go to Wikipedia, 755 to 756. All right? So there are the dates there. And 1,260. I should ask some of the young ones to do that, because they'll do it like that, without a calculator, won't they? The answer is 2015 to 2016. I added one more year because we know that when Russia did go into the Middle East, it was about September. So over 2 years would bridge us into 2017. And so, let's think about it. What that means is this. The papacy took political control of parts of Europe, and it will remain for 1,260 years. All right? And at the end of that time, they will lose that temporal power. Now, have they still got it? And still rules Europe. There's the Pope. There's the leader of the EU. Mr. Van Rompuy, he's a priest. He's a Jesuit. He doesn't have to wear priestly garments. He's a Jesuit. The Jesuits are called the Papal Army. This man, he runs the biggest bank in Europe, the combined bank. He's a Jesuit. This man, Joseph Barroso. This man, he runs the Club of Rome when they all come together. He's a Jesuit. This man over here, he's a Jesuit. This lady, she's Roman Catholic, at least anyhow. And she comes from Britain, and she represents Britain there. But almost everybody you can think about of key importance are Roman Catholic priests running Europe. Still runs Europe. In that position, 6 Jesuits. Now, the papers suddenly went mad on it because this man made a stumble. He said we all went to the same school. And the paper, this would be about a year ago, went crazy, hunting it all up, and found out as many people as they could where they went, and found out Jesuit school, Jesuit school, Jesuit school, Jesuit school. Now, not all of them were, but many of them were. And they swear to the Pope that if the Pope asks them to murder somebody, they will do so. They are utter allegiance to the papacy. They are the Papal Army in Mufti. Okay? And so, what's going to happen? Well, if Putin takes over, will he allow that to happen? I suspect Putin will take over politically. And Russia will no longer, Europe will no longer have the EU ruling it. And it's about to break up. It's all falling apart. It's looking precarious. They think if Britain leaves, that will really, really help to break things up. So it looks like in a moment that could change. And so here we are. At a very critical time, things are heating up. Russia's in the Middle East. When so? 2015. All right, well, let's leave that for a moment. Time's running away from me. Here's another point. Matthew chapter 24 says we'll be eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until, and then goes on to speak of the coming of the Lord. What does that say? We'll live in prosperity until we're taken. Again, in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until he was called out and his family to leave. And then judgment came. Didn't it? In both cases. So what does that tell us? The world will experience a financial collapse after Christ's return. We're not going to experience it. If we were waiting for that to happen, we could wait till the economy absolutely collapsed and we get our act together, could we? That's not what's going to happen. Now, my time's really running away from me, so excuse me, I'll not turn this one up. But here's a quote, Isaiah 24, verse 1. Behold, Yahweh maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. And it shall be as with the servant, so with the master. As with the maid, so with the mistress. As with the buyer, so with the seller, and so on. Brother Sully said this in his book, commenting on that chapter. The chapter goes on later on, and is quoted by Christ 6 times, or cited by Christ 6 times, in Luke chapter 21, which deals with Christ's return. That part of Luke 21. And he says this, commenting on that, this relates to our day. And he says, all confidence in the money market is gone, for there is neither buyer nor seller. Now this is what's to happen after we leave. All stocks are worthless, all bonds low, all security swept away, no banks, scarcely any money, little or no bread, food so scarce, every household desolate, a terrible state of things. My goodness, isn't it wonderful we got the truth? Isn't it? We're taken before that. Start of this year, the Reserve Bank of Scotland stated, look, sell everything to some of its key investors ahead of the stock market crash that's coming this year. That's what they said. Sell everything except quality bonds. Look at Europe. EU on the brink. Germany's biggest bank records shock losses, economic ruin of the Eurozone. This is the strongest economy in Europe, Germany, and it loses 2.1 billion in one quarter. So we see now, American dollar, if you've got one in your pocket, I've got one, it's changed its face. All right? They really say things are in a precarious situation. Dollar tumbles as Fed rescues China. Why? Well, go back only a few days ago. Here The Economist, the leading newspaper, financial newspaper, says this. The coming debt bust, it is a question of when, not if, real trouble will hit China. And they're talking about huge problems growing in China. I can't read the whole of it because time's rushing away from us. But things are looking frightening. And look, only a little way ago, only a few days ago, they were saying China's in deep trouble, deep trouble. I think they said 296%. Its debt was 296% of GDP. That means let all the Chinese don't eat anything for nearly 3 years and spend nothing and work like slaves, and they'll pay the debt off. Horrendous problems coming. Okay. I could go on, but let's not do it. We've got to see Israel. Maybe I'll come back to that for a minute. Jews continue to return to the land, and we expect, don't we, them to dwell confidently in the land. Well, that's what we're expecting, isn't it? To continue. Well, last year and this year, Aliyah. The Jews coming out of Europe is huge. France has had an increase of something to the order of about 118%. The leader of commerce, the member of parliament who runs the commerce of France, got really panicking because there's so many Jews leaving. And he raced down and saw Netanyahu and said, can't you cause some of your young people who are good at businesses to come home, back to France? Because our economy is falling apart. These are good business people. And not only when they come down to Israel, do you know what else they're bringing with them? Their money. Their money. And it's hurting our economy. And it's helping Israel. Okay. So the numbers are pouring in there. Out of Ukraine, it's jumped by 250%. And what are we finding on the West Bank? Things are not looking good for the Palestinians. Oh, this is very serious. Go and talk to Ted over there and myself afterwards. The school teachers are marching. All right? 50,000 have marched in Ramallah, protesting they're not getting paid properly. Why not? Because the Palestinians used to get a component of the tax from Israel, a fair component, money from EU, money from the Saudis and other rich Arab countries, and they're not getting it now except from Israel. Not getting it now from Israel. So they can't afford to keep the terrorists in jobs, nor can they afford to keep their police, their teachers in jobs. So, look at the West Bank. Night time. It's going into darkness. Why? Because they haven't paid their power bill. It's now reached 430 million. They haven't been paying it. All right? And Israel's been going around the West Bank and saying, all right, you're a reliable Arab, come here. You haven't got a job? No. I'll make you a policeman. You're relatively pro-Israeli. You over there, you're a sensible Arab. You become a policeman. And they're beginning to change the West Bank. What about Gaza? Hamas scrambles to make up a budget shortfall. The Egyptians have closed the tunnels which the Hamas were running to put, goods back and forth, and were taxing everything going through. They were closed by Egypt at Israel's request. As well as that, they halted Iran's support, no more money coming in. Iran hasn't been sending it in. And all international aid has basically stopped. So they're in real shortfall, really in financial trouble. And what about Israel? They're confident. Now, young ladies, if you were over in Israel, you wouldn't because you're a Christadelphian, but be that as it may, you can join the army. Everybody does when they leave high school. They go into the army for about 3 years. There they meet their partners and so forth. They really love going into the army. It's great fun. Nowadays, they don't have to leave Tel Aviv if they live there. See, if you're good at a computer, look, you can sit in front of this and run a fighter plane. Or you can run a naval vessel. Or you can run a tank. All remotely. And that's the way Israel's going with their army. Not likely to lose too many men they go into battle next time. And they apparently have told America early in the peace, when ISIS terrorism begins, if you ask us, we'll wipe them out with these. Now that's not come to that, but Israel is that confident that they could do that with their fleet of drones. All right, so lastly, Israel and its neighbours. And according to the Bible, Israel should be friendly with Egypt. Egypt floods the Hamas tunnels in part due to Israel's request. The cooperation with Egypt is stronger than ever. They're getting on fine. Not only are they getting on fine with Egypt, with also Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia sees Israel as an ally. Why? Well, because over the other side of the Persian Gulf is the Iranians building nuclear weapons, some of which are aimed at Saudi Arabia. And they're saying, who can defend us? America? America says, oh no, we're not interested really. But Israel says, we can. And my goodness, they're starting to be very close friends with Israel. Not publicly, but privately. Look at this. Here's Jordan. A quiet alliance. Jordan and Israel cooperate on the rise. That's exactly what we expected from Scripture. We've got to expect Edom, Ammon and Moab, Jordan, Egypt, and of course the Saudi Peninsula area, Yemen, right through to Yemen, allied with Israel. And finally, as Daniel 11 says, coming to their defence. Well, the time periods agree. Things are going very quickly. Here's the dates, some of the dates in Scriptures. All multiples of 7. Let's look at one particular one, the Jubilees. If you go, we won't go to it, but in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 18, it says, of the Jubilee period, that it is 49 years, 7 Sabbaths a year, 7 times 7, 7 Sabbaths a year. even 49 years. All right? So it's definitely, how can that work? Ask yourself, what's a Jubilee? Everybody says 50, don't we? You see, it works like this. The Jubilee lasts from there to there. 7 lots of 7 years, 49 years. But the Jubilee is announced in the first year of the next block of 7. The next block of 7. There. The next block of 7. So if you take from Jubilee, when the Jubilee is announced, to the next, it's exactly 49 years apart. Okay? Well, let's see how that works. And incidentally, supporting that, if you go into the old Heralds, there's 2 chaps that I think we can trust. Brother Thomas, and he also quoted somebody I don't know if you've heard about called Isaac Newton. Okay? So Isaac Newton, who wrote a lot on religion, he said so too. So he's a pretty smart cookie. So we'll accept that, shall we? All right, now let's look at that again. When were the Jubilees? Here they are. Let's take the first one. National homeland became possible for Israel. 49 years later, 1966, Jerusalem returned to the hand of the Jews. I can remember in Enfield when I was a young man, hearing talks on this coming up. They said 1967 is going to be a big year. We didn't know what it was going to be, but we knew it would be a big year because it was a Jubilee. And man, were we excited when Jerusalem fell to the Jews. What about this one? It started already. Russia's in the Middle East. What's it going to lead to? We don't know. It could be that Israel takes control of the West Bank and gets the whole land. We don't know. But things are looking very exciting. So let's bring things to a close. We're racing, using too much time. Look, this is what Christ said in Luke chapter 12. Brethren and sisters, young people, let your loins be girt about, your lights burning. We know the time's short, don't we? Super short. And ye yourselves like men that wait for their Lord. Remember Moses, Joshua going up onto the mountain, waiting 40 days for Moses to come down, as we talked about in the exhort. And then when he cometh and knocketh, they may open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants, that's us, whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at a time when ye think not. No, we don't exactly know the time. We know the signs and we know the general times, but we don't exactly know the times. But finally, let it be that we listen to Christ. Go forth unto the kings of the earth and gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. We're seeing that happening. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he or she that watcheth and keepeth his or her garments, lest he walk naked and they see his or her shame. Let it be, brethren and sisters and young people, that each and every one of us are prepared when Christ returns. It can't be far. Can't be far. There's so much happening. It is indeed very, very exciting up there. Thank you.